Mike,
Can you guys hear me?
not over there, the photo.
Okay.
Something on the flyer. It said photo opportunity. You get
If you're paying a different amount,
over there.
that was the VIP
Otherwise,
host
it's there.
section.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. About 3 weeks ago, I had no idea I'd be doing this event until my friends Lothar and Carl and Mayer told me that I wouldn't be, and here I am doing it. So I had a short runway, but thank you guys for joining us. I also want to, I know we have a lot of people here that were not previously involved in politics. A lot of you are dentists and physicians, and I really thank you for giving me the opportunity, for those of you that haven't been involved in politics, to introduce you to it a bit. And for those of you that said that you weren't involved in politics, I think what's a good analogy, a lot of my friends that have told me they're not involved in politics, is like a drowning man that's saying that he's not involved in water. You're involved in politics because politics is involved in you, whether you see it or not. Because if we don't see it, it's to our own detriment. But it really is something that's part of all of our lives. I was going to use a teleprompter, but the White House sequestered all. I don't know why. They said it was a game. You know, in putting together the event, there's one thing that I've heard many times from Bruce Lee. He says that grasping life is trying to grasp water in your hands because it's so elusive. Well, trying to do a fundraiser for politics, since this is the only event that I've done, is like trying to pick up water with a toothpick. So for those of you dentists that are here, thank you for helping us dispel the notion that dentists should cheat. So thank you. All right, we're not cheating. And by the way, since a lot of you weren't involved in politics, when I mentioned that our guest speaker was going to be Eric Cantor, a lot of you said, great, I can't wait to see the Attorney General. Different Eric. And I said, you mean the one from Fast and Furious? They said, oh, I didn't know he was in a movie. So that's a different Eric. That's from the Mexican cartel drug running thing that he botched up. But, you know, as doctors and as physicians, you guys are, whether you know it or not, you're in the top 10% of the income bracket. The top 10%ers pay 70% of the federal income tax. So picture this. You go to a restaurant with 9 other people. The bill comes, it's $500. You chip in $350, and everybody else chips in $15 a piece, the 9 of them. And they say you didn't put in enough. That's the story of your life, whether you see it or not. And a lot of us here, some of us are the top 1%ers. Well, for those of you that are top 1%, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, if you went to that same restaurant that was $50 a head, I could tell you that when that bill came out, if you went with the other 99 people, the bill would be $5,000 and you would chip in $2,000 and everybody else, 99 of them, would pay $30 and would say that you didn't pay your fair share and when can we do it again? Right. So if you're comfortable with that, that's the environment in which we live. And another interesting statistic, the top 1% have an aggregate wealth of $1.5 trillion. The bottom 50% of income earners in the United States also have an aggregate wealth of $1.5 trillion. Now, the bottom 50% of income earners pay 1% of the income tax. That means the average person in that group pays 1/50th of 1% of the federal income tax. The top 1% pays 40%. Not dollar-wise, but percentage-wise, which is even worse. That means the top 1%ers pay 2,000 times the percent of income tax as anyone that's in the bottom half of the income earners in this country, which I think is a terrible imbalance. And for us to have happiness in this country, I think we need to get it back into balance. And we've just been giving away what we don't have, which is basically, you know, a violation of financial physics. You know, when Ronald Reagan first spoke in front of the joint sessions of Congress, he realized that they didn't have a grasp of what $1 trillion was. So the way that he decided to help them perceive it, to get their mental arms around it, so to speak, was this. If you could take $1,000 bills, which they used to use actually as currency between the banks, they really do print them. I think it's the Statue of Liberty on them. If you could stack them the thin way, the way with the rubber band around it, how high do you think it would be to be $1 million? 4 inches. 4 inches, that's correct. And how high, since Randy got the answer right, how high would it be to be $1 trillion, Randy?
67 miles.
You are correct. 67 miles to be $1 trillion. We are now $16 trillion in debt, which means that if we were to stack $1,000 bills from the tip of Key West halfway to Canada, that with the thin way, with the rubber band wrapped around them, that would be $16 trillion. That's how deep in the hole we are. We all know the rule of holes. When you're in one, stop digging, right? Well, we haven't stopped digging yet. With our president at the helm, he had promised that that we were going to cut the deficit down in half. instead of cutting it in half, he's doubled it. It was $800 billion when he took office. It is now $1.6 trillion. So what should have been $400 billion is now $1.6 trillion. He's quadrupled it. When he was campaigning, I remember seeing a speech of his in North Dakota where he said that George W. Bush was guilty of treason because he had spent $4 trillion in 8 years. That's $500 billion a year. He has spent $6 trillion in 3 years. That is $2 trillion a year. That's quadruple what George W. Bush spent. And by the way, if you want to add up what the value of this country is, 3 years ago, the total net worth of the United States was $68 trillion. Today it is $55 trillion. That means we are down 19%. It's a downward spiral and continuing to spiral downward. So unless we do something to grab a hold of things, I just see us as continuing going on this downward spiral. We borrow 40 cents out of every dollar, most of it from China. And imagine if you guys did that on your credit card, how horrible things would be, okay? When Ronald Reagan was president, what he did was he cut the marginal tax rate from 38 to 25%. And in doing so, he freed up a lot of liquidity in this country. And in doing so, he obviously had our country make a tremendous comeback. And by the way, when he took office, after Jimmy Carter, he started out with 18% unemployment, not 7% unemployment like our President Obama did. And he created 22 million jobs as compared with President Obama, who has cut 2 million jobs, unfortunately. The entitlement program seemed to grow ever stronger. We have 99 weeks of unemployment. That's almost 2 years. That's almost the length of doing a dental specialty. And if people are told they get paid to stay home for 2 years, I'd say a lot of them are probably going to want to do just that. So a lot of people are motivated. They're motivated to stay home. So I think what we need to do is to work on that as well, because the entitlement programs such as that really are not helping us. If anything, they're just hurting us. And one interesting statistic that we don't hear about, since we hear so much about unemployment, is employment. The employment rate of people that are over age 16 in this country is 58.5%, okay? So I think people do reverse math when they think that 8% is the unemployment rate. That means 92% are employed. No one ever talks about the fact that the employment rate is not 92. It's 58.5%. It's horrible. A friend of mine owns a home health care agency, and he explained to me one way Obama has reduced the unemployment rate artificially, which is pretty interesting. He took away the ability for them to waive going into overtime at 40 hours, because a lot of people that have home health care aides, they want the same person 168 hours a week, but nobody's going to pay overtime at 40 hours. So instead of having one job that paid pretty well, you got 4 jobs that pay next to nothing. You got thousands of more jobs, but you don't have any more income in the economy. So a lot of what you see in terms of manipulating the unemployment rate is really just lying about statistics. There's actually a book written about lying about statistics. That's the title of it. So, and I think that's what's being done. Another interesting number, 93,000 wounded soldiers were treated by the Veterans Hospital Administration last year. That is up 183% in the last 5 years. They've only increased 24% in staffing. I think it's a really good corollary to see what's around the pipe with Obamacare. If this thing passes, well, it's passed, but if it comes to fruition, I think that that's indicative of what you could see around the corner. So what do we do to create jobs? Well, first of all, we've got to correct the housing market before you're going to create jobs, because if somebody is going to have a great job in another state, guess what? They can't move there until they sell their house wherever they're currently living. So without solving the housing crisis, you're not going to really truly solve the jobs crisis, especially amongst those that are the better paying jobs. So what would be a good solution? I think one of them would be energy independence. We spend $500 billion a year with OPEC, whereas we're not creating enough oil and energy of our own. Ask yourself this question. Do you think that the Arab world would stop drilling because they wanted to not infringe upon the comforts of the caribou? Because that's what we do in Anwar. And for those of you that have ever seen pictures of Anwar, it looks like the cracked salt flats of Utah. It is not the beautiful wonderland that it is promoted to be. We just hit 24 billion barrels of oil in North Dakota, and the only reason that I think that we've been able to do that is because it was on private property. I can assure you if it was on federal land, you'd instantly see roadblocks, because as Stephen Chu, the Energy Secretary, said, which he previously reversed, he wanted to see the price of oil go up, and that's one great way to do it, is to stop us from drilling. We, of course, had that tragedy with the BP oil well, and I guess that what President Obama forgot is when things go wrong, don't go with them. You know, when we heard that we shut down the oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico, does anybody have any idea how many got shut down? 3,500 oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico were shut down because one went wrong. I think what we should have done is handle things differently, and I think to do that we need a different administration. But nuclear power. We have 104 nuclear reactors in the United States. We haven't built one in 40 years. It is the cleanest source of renewable energy that exists. So the dream world of running off of purely ethanol and solar panels is just not reality. You know, it's been said that the three virtues are courage, temperance, and wisdom. I think that if we have the courage to do the right thing and the temperance to accept what we can't accomplish and the wisdom to know the difference, I think we're golden. And I think that we do have the wisdom to know the difference. I think that we can fix this. We just haven't really taken the bull by the horns to do it. So, but without any further ado, I would just say that behind me, of course, is the flag of the United States, which represents our traditional values. And before me are the people that put it there. And beside me is the person that spends his life defending it. So with no further ado, I will introduce you to the Majority Leader of the United States House of Representatives, Congressman Eric Cantor.
That was good.